For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life.
Your key to financial opportunity.
So, Fred, obviously this is a little spontaneous. I don't have like a plan ready of what to ask you or anything, but can you just talk about that day? Can you talk about what your role was at the grain elevator, what you were doing before they came in, that kind of thing?
Well, I was sitting in the office. I look out the window, and here comes that car. The manager, Morris Christie, said we're in trouble. And I said, bullshit, stood up. Oh, my gosh, we are in trouble.
Did they come, like, speeding at you? Why did you think you were in trouble?
Well, the grain elevator and the office were 30 yards apart. In between the two, the car comes in, and I'm looking out a window, Morris Christie looking out a window, and one of the millwrights that was hired to do some work, pickup was between the two. And Glenn Moore himself and a Rick Schrader were standing on the, the pickup would have been parked north, so they were standing on the passenger side of the pickup with these two guys with guns. Forced them into the back of the pickup, and I saw them, and so did Morse. But I could identify Daniel Rometta right off.
Yeah.
And you go through the history of it. I don't know who the top dog is. Who knows? Let's put it this way: when this all happened, and when everything, the other guy standing there with a gun was I saw him as a bearded guy, and in the trial I just recognized a bearded guy. In the trial, he was all shaded up and he was all shaved up and cleaned up. So I didn't flat out say that I could recognize him. But the police and everybody says he's the guy that had the beard. So okay, the two people that loaded Rick and Glenn into the pickup would have been Daniel Rometta and James Hunter. So I'm sitting there thinking something defensive to do. Morse thinks something to do. He goes, locks the front door. And when you're in a situation like that, your brain is moving like you can't believe. The only thing that I can think of doing, I didn't think the locking door was going to do squat, but Morse locked the door and went to the phone. I dropped the blind. I just drop the blind. Your mind goes through everything. Your mind searches the attic of that office, everything. And quite honestly, I've never been in the attic of that office, but I searched everything for a gun. So my only defense at the time, I didn't know it, but it saved my life, was I dropped the blind on that window, and then I dropped to the floor. And what hid me from Daniel Rometta in the front, 6 foot by 6 foot window, broke that in, and there's a counter between that window and me. And then here comes James Hunter, probably is the one that kicked the back window out, and when I was on the floor, I saw the Waffle Stomper shoe that James Hunter was wearing. I never did put that through the trial. The only reason I knew that was his shoe is because one of the deputies later, I'm kind of brain dead and I didn't know what to call it, but he called it a Waffle Stomper shoe, and he's correct. It's Waffle Stomper type shoe that went through that back window, but that never went through the trial because I didn't say it. But anyway, Randy Jones drew the Waffle Stomper shoe, and the Waffle Stomper shoe was an imprint between the two bodies out in the country road where they killed Glenn and Rick. But anyway, he kicked that back window in. Morse Savosky's already been shot, and he went in the front of it. And I could see all this. This Daniel Rometta hollered out, nobody else is in there. And when I'm laying on the floor, I said, Jesus Christ, here I come. And I honestly did. I thought it was over. because that guy in the back, which I say was Jim Hunter, all he had to do was, good God, look down tiny bit to his left and I'm dead. And he didn't look down because I'm only, crying out, how far away am I? I'm 5 foot away from him. All he has to do is look down the floor. And those windows are not high in the air. Those windows were only 2 foot off the ground. So it was nothing for him to just turn and look, and there I am laying on the ground, laying on the floor. But anyway, Morris Savosky got up and said, not Morris Christie said that, not Savosky, he's another. Christie said, I'm shot, and I already knew that. God, at that time I thought, oh God, Morris, you just got us all killed. Because I didn't know they was gone. He got up and then I ran to the phone and dialed 0 and called emergency. Back in them days in Levant, Kansas, you didn't have 911. You just had to dial 0. And the operator got on it. So that's my story. I've learned since then, within the last 2 years, see, during this trial, I was, gee, many Christmas you sit and you think, how in the hell can you pick up a hitchhiker in Wichita, Kansas, develop enough trust, and come out here, and that hitchhiker is shooting people? You know, that blows your mind. It probably blew the jury's mind, but he was guilty here. But now I have recently learned that was not a hitchhiker. That was a rendezvous. It was a rendezvous. Jim Hunter was a friend of Mark Walters. When the people were in jail, they were talking about that inadvertently. In some way, somehow, it got onto somebody's notes, and it never made it into the trial. So he wasn't just some nonchalant hitchhiker. He was a friend of Mark Walters, is what I've learned. Where I heard it, because that was never in the trial. It was never in his retrial. He got off on the retrial. He died about 3 days after he was let out of jail. He was having heart problems in jail at Hayes. And then he went to a bar in Kansas City and was drinking, and that was it. It really changed. It would have, if that was ever, it would have changed the entire outlook. And you would think because a person with common sense, you just can't figure out how in the hell can a hitchhiker get confident enough to so-called join that gang. And he did. Well, there any question, he's the one that probably pulled the trigger here in Thomas County that killed Glenn and Rick, because his shoe print was right between both heads, between both bodies. So, and anyway, when I look out, I see the two guys with guns loading up Rick. Now, it's quite possible Lisa was there too, but I don't want to go there and state for sure. But she was the driver. Wait a minute. There was a witness. I don't remember if she was the driver of Glenn Moore's pickup being drove out. Took Glenn Moore's pickup out. They left the car. I don't remember if the witness saw him going down the road, which she was the passenger sitting in between them. She was probably, a lot of people think she was the main culprit, but I don't know. Who in the hell knows? And I gave my written testimony to Mike Bond. And it's shocking to me today to read my written testimony, because it looks like it's written by a kindergartner, and I've got a college education. And it's funny, when this trial was going on, nobody knew these written testimonies were around, and then the defense lawyer took me to task on I don't remember. I'm going to guess the blonde hair Lisa done. God, I was upset, so I ran over to the police station after I got off stand and looked for my written testimony. Nobody knew where the hell it was. Nobody did. Well, later on, the KBI found it in Topeka. I don't know how the heck it made Topeka, but they got it back. But but all it does is state that in a kindergarten writing something that there's two guys with guns. But the language, the wording, the sentences, my God, there is no doubt my brain was still in shock the whole incident because of that written statement. At that time, Morris Christie's wife, I drove her behind the ambulance. And then I get to the hospital. I see Brenda Schrader, Rick's widow. It would have been widow at the time. She didn't know it. And the police told me, just tell her one of them's dead. And that's all I did. And I drove her around. And then in Mike Bond, I go back to the elevator, which is 9 miles away from the corner. I go back to the elevator and lock it up. And Mike Bond tells me to write a statement. Well, hell, I'm moving. And I write a statement. And yeah, there's no doubt my brain was in shock. I couldn't even spell if, and, or but. But anyway, we understand that there was two men with guns.
Where was Morris shot? Where was he shot?
He turned away from Rometta because Rometta's the one that shot him for sure.
Okay.
And he just turned, and he was shot in the back. The bullet lodged right behind the heart, and it was so he died. He didn't die until, oh gosh, I don't know. He died. Gosh, got to be 15 years ago. He died. He died with that bullet in his body. Back in them days, they thought it was too dangerous to remove that bullet. But he wasn't crippled or anything. The bullet did put a hole through one of his lungs because he was bleeding. He couldn't lay down. When I was trying to get him to lay down, he had to sit up or else the blood had come out of his mouth.
When all this was happening, so I'm sure you know now, but didn't know at the time, most of the homicides they committed were robberies. Was there anything, I guess they were stopping at the grain field to steal a car because they needed a new vehicle because the other one was hot at the moment, I guess is what you would call it. Did they attempt to take any money or anything from anybody in there?
Oh no, there's a grain elevator. There's no money at a grain elevator. No, okay. They just wanted to get rid of that car and get a different vehicle. They were being chased already from Ben Albright on the interstate. Well, Ben Albright stopped them because it was a suspicious car. Yeah. They knew there was a murder already in Grainfield. They had no idea what vehicle, but when Albright stopped them, then they got afraid and wanted a different vehicle.
I guess they went in because they wanted to kill everybody inside so there was no witnesses?
That is very true. They did that every place they went. They did not want to leave anybody. And what satisfied Daniel Rometta and me eyeballed each other throughout that window before I dropped the blind.
Yeah.
He knew there was one person in there. So what satisfied his mind, he shot Morse, and he thought that was that one person. He yelled out the window to Hunter in the back. Nobody else was in there. And like I said, then I thought, I got a chance to make it out of this.
And how long was this whole thing? They were in there for what, like 5 minutes? Or it probably seemed like an eternity, I would guess, but...
Oh, I would guess you're correct. They were in there 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably about a 5-minute period because they pulled in beside the pickup where Glenn and Rick were and loaded them up the pickup, wanted to get out of there. And, Glenn's crew was sitting on the other side of the elevator working on grain auger, so they didn't know what the heck was going on. Because he was asking what's going on, and then I immediately, and the dispatcher was asking me a question on the phone that I couldn't answer, so she hung up on me. Now, she was a good, Mary Messamore, she just recently died. I called her back. I zeroed back, and I gave her, and then I put that Haranza on the phone because he was telling them the direction the vehicle was going and everything, so that's why they knew that through Haranza, they knew the vehicle was headed towards Colby, which was east. So that's how they knew.
It's a crazy story. The more that I research this and the more people I talk to, it's just wild. I mean, like you said, I can't imagine what was going through your head while you were underneath that counter.
Well, before I hit the floor, I was trying to find something defensive. That's obvious.
Yeah.
When I hit the floor, I thought I was dying. I thought I was gone. I thought there's no way I was making through this thing. But anyway, I made it through it.
You did. You're one of the lucky ones.
Yes.
You and a couple others. I'm sure you know about the victim they had in Texas who they shot several times that she ended up surviving. And
I saw her, and she came to Colby. Yeah. And they wanted her to, and she was going to testify that Lisa Dunn yelled out, "Shoot her again, shoot her again, shoot her again, shoot her again." But the defense lawyers would reject it, and she did not get to testify in Colby. She was here, and the prosecution was ready to put her on the stand at the preliminary, but they would not let her do it. Now, it's the same thing that happened with the Waffle Stomper shoe. You want to hear that story?
Yeah, tell me.
The story of the Waffle Stomper shoe. The Waffle Stomper shoe that, like I said, I saw it go through the back window, and I didn't testify to that in the trial because I had enough to testify to, and I didn't want to confuse anything. So anyway, between the bodies, the KBI agent, which is a Murray, back in them days, you had a 35 millimeter, and the 35 millimeters back then didn't warn you that the cap is on the lens. The KBI agent didn't take the lens cap off of the camera. So he shot pictures of the two bodies and the Waffle Stomper shoe in between the two bodies. But obviously with the cap on the cover, it didn't come out. So this Randy Jones got an artist, and he had the artist draw out to his specification what he saw. He drew the two bodies and where the Waffle Stomper shoe was between the two bodies, and where he drew it. That trajectory works perfect for the two shots that hit Glenn in the head and Rick in the head. So he had him draw it out. That was brought up in preliminary hearing, but it was thrown out again because it wasn't a picture, it was a drawn-out picture. So that was not able to be used in preliminary hearing, so there's objection. But I was told about it, and that's where my brain hit, oh, that's a Waffle Stomper shoe. I understood it. So anyway. Well, I didn't know it was called that, but they just look like the way you make a waffle, and that makes perfect sense. You call it a Waffle Stomper bottom of the shoe.
Well, it sounds like some important things were left out of the trial then.
Well, yes, but they weren't left out intentionally, I'll tell you that.
There was a very important ruling on the death penalty today from the Supreme Court. It is one that could affect hundreds of convicts on death row.
And I guess just to start, stories about my dad from family and friends, 90+% come from friends of his. They're all funny stories. No one says anything otherwise. It's, coming home late and trying to avoid situations, so they drove down the railroad tracks, or him and his best friend and another gentleman in a Mach 1, and someone lit a M80, and they all had to bail out on Main Street, and it did blow up the inside of the car. I do get a lot of funny stories like that, and they're fun to listen to, but not a lot of in-depth stuff. It's just people reliving their good memories, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, it was difficult growing up without my father. I mean, you always had to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Like, why is this my life? But my mother did remarry when I was, I believe 4, and, Dad died when I was 2. And so I had, 4 new siblings. So we were a family of 8. It was a lot, but, he was my father figure my whole life. But, it was difficult not having my dad around, especially lately, where I've kind of gotten out of that nomad experience and just not wanting to be tied down. And now I'm settled down. I live in the town where he went to high school in. I love it. I love this community. And one of the things that's tough is I just had a daughter literally 4 months ago today. And it would have been so nice for him to have met her. I feel like that was robbed of me. And there's certain things that are tough to forgive. As far as when did my family tell me about what happened, I don't even remember. I just remember I was so young. I would go over to my grandparents' house. They had a Pee Wee Herman VHS. One day, accidentally grabbed one of the recordings of the trial. And that's kind of, I think that might have been when my grandparents had to explain to me what that video was all about. But I couldn't have been more than 4 or 5. And so it affected me to where I guess I don't know how to word this properly. It just kind of made me numb to a lot of feelings that maybe more people show more passionate about. How I keep my family, or how I keep his memory alive now. He left me a good last name. My brother looks just like him, and he took over the family farm, which I think would make my dad extremely proud of. And he's one of the better farmers in the area, so any chance he needs help, I'm out there helping him, because that's our legacy. It just missed a generation, and so that is very difficult. The community's reaction is either you get great stories, funny stories. Again, driving down the railroad tracks, I'm not sure what was going on there, but it was funny. Or you get stories about someone coming up to you at a random location and they just start telling you about where they were either during the chase or during the trial and what was going through their minds. Both reactions I greatly appreciate. I love the people that tell me fun stories. There's a lot of them, and there's a lot of good people in this area. And then the good people, but they were hurt by this, and they wanted justice. And so far, it's not complete, but more needs to be done. At this point, you just live with what it is. But yeah, people still talk about it to this day. I started my new job, approximately 2.5 years ago, and that was the first thing that my manager and coworker were talking about was how old was I when it all happened. And it's bound to happen. I live in a town of 300 and grew up in the neighboring town of 4,000. So it's a small town and people talk. That's just how it's going to be. But yeah, Colby does know about his memory. He had a trailer house or a house back by an old bar, and I don't know. I hear a lot of stories from that, and they're humorous, but at the same time, it was a different era, and I guess 18-year-olds could drink, and they would tend to have a little more fun than I thought would be legal. I don't know how else to word that. But the stories that people bring up specifically, I guess it would be, and this is dark, but this is also, this is a small town community. This is where we get along, we wave at each other, even if we do have a beef with someone else, but everyone wishes that it would have been finished that day. I think for my mental health, that would have been great too, but the people, the community, we don't need this type of stuff out here. And so, yeah, everybody does wish that, not everybody, I can't speak for everybody, but a lot of people have expressed that they would love for it to have been just done and over with that day. But we also live in a system with courts. But I don't know. But I do get fun memories. Unfortunately, a couple days, about a week or two ago, my dad's mother passed away, and she did always have a fun story about my dad, Rick, and that was he got himself a motorcycle, and he was a big man, not heavy, strong, and he would drive around the yard, grab her while he was driving the motorcycle until my grandmother yelled enough to put her down. And I don't know, it's kind of a funny memory. I mean, we don't do that stuff anymore. But he just sounded like a really fun guy. And again, I was 2 when he passed, and so I really don't know a whole lot other than what people have told me. And my brother and I, we have a little suitcase. It's full of his last possessions. When I was, I'm going to guess, middle school, told my brother, I said, I'll take the watches, and my brother took the belt buckles. And it was really cool because Nick got, I want to say it's PFR or something. It's the rodeo in Vegas, but my dad had every single belt buckle except for 1971, I think. And my brother completed his collection by buying the missing belt buckles, and then has continued the tradition and has bought everyone since then. So while we really never got to know him, and I only have one brief memory of him, we're still trying to keep the memory alive, and my brother's doing a great job of it. He is doing a great job with the farm, and it's just little things like that that make you love your family a little more.
When they got to the grain elevator company, they shot through the window, wounding the office manager.
So I was besides being a Colby police officer, I had driven ambulance for Thomas County EMS also. So I was out working on my pickup at the ambulance garage when we got the call of Deputy Ben Albright being shot at the Levant exit. So I rode out with the ambulance director in his first response vehicle and gave aid to Ben Albright. And then we gained information about the shooting in Levant at the elevator. So John Griggs and I went in there. He was the ambulance director at the time. And then after we gave him some aid, and then I can't remember exactly how all happened, but then we had the call of the two gentlemen that had been executed alongside the road, and that was like at the 4 Mile corner, I think west of Colby, if I remember right. It's been a lot of years. And I met up with Randy Jones, who was assistant chief of police at the time, I believe, and I got in with him, and then they were still chasing them up north of Colby somewhere, and I went ahead and rode with Randy because we were trying to find our way through some county roads we didn't know. It had already ended by the time we got up north near the county line where all of them had been, one was deceased at the time, Daniel Remetta was shot, and one gentleman had been killed there at the scene too. After that, when the ambulances got there, they gave me custody of Daniel Remetta, and I rode in the ambulance with him to the ER in Colby, took evidence from his clothing and so on, and maintained there until I can't remember if he was held in the hospital at that point or released back into the jail or not. That he had been shot in the buttocks. Who exactly it was that hit him, but someone did. He was conscious the whole time. I didn't have any conversation with him. Any of that I would have had would not have been due to the case unless he just started talking, because I knew there were going to be investigators wanting to interview him, and I didn't want to interfere with any of that. Lisa Dunn, I was in dispatch area when she would talk back and forth with Daniel Remetta and so on. Oh, how much they loved each other, and basically that they were sorry this happened, but mainly it was a love story between him and her. And she definitely the leader in that portion of it, as far as the whole conversation I felt. Later on, she claimed that it was an abusive situation and so on to get out of the charges, I guess you could say. And I don't know about the intelligence level of him and her. I just knew the conversation. I testified in Florida when he was charged there with the murder down there. And, I didn't get to sit on anything except for my testimony because we were all sequestered out of court. But, listening to, I spoke with the lady that lived. They took her out in the country. I don't know if that was the Arkansas one or the Texas one, but they had, taken her out and they thought killed her and left her to die in the middle of nowhere. And she talked a little bit about her end of things, about what occurred and so on. But that's been so long I can't remember all what she even said. But she's a lucky lady as far as I was concerned, because the way the wide swath those guys were cutting, just even in Kansas with the killings and the shootings, yeah, she was lucky to be alive.
It's the tops.
Make your meals.
Nationals losing today.
I am retired from Colby Community College. We have a 2-year liberal arts college here, and I taught there for 37 years. So we're looking at 1985, which is close to 30 years ago, but it is still so fresh in my mind as to what happened. I can relive everything for that weekend. But anyway, we have a group called Phi Beta Lambda, which I was the advisor of, that stands for Future Business Leaders, and there are several chapters across the state, probably a dozen or 13. I'm not sure how many there is now. The student I took a busload of students to the state conference in February of 1985, and our local president was also the state president. And so we made it to Wichita. When we were traveling on I-70 East, which is the highway that runs by Colby, we had to have met Daniel Rometta and Lisa Dunn and Ike Hunter, I think was his last name, not knowing that was them. It's just kind of, freaky that we met them going one direction and they were going the other. They were headed to Colby. We got to Wichita and, I don't know, there was probably a couple of hundred college students there, but Renee, the student I'm talking about, was in opening general session that evening, and we were listening and in the audience, and a hotel worker came up to me and said, "You have an emergency phone call." And so I followed her, back to the area where the phone was, and it was my wife. And she said, "I don't know any details." She said, "I don't know whether he's alive or whether he's passed away. There are other shootings that have happened." She said, "I don't really have any information other than I know Renee's dad has been shot." So anyway, once the general session was over, her session was over, another advisor and I took Renee to my room and told her, which was extremely difficult for me, and I had trouble keeping the tears away, that her father had been shot. Of course, her first reaction was, "Is he alive?" I don't know. All I know is that there's something terrible going on in the Levant-Colby area. I know your dad was shot at the Levant grain elevator, but I don't know whether he's alive or dead. And I said, "We'll just have to wait and see." And of course she started crying, and I don't know how this came about. This is one area that I'm a little bit unfamiliar with how it all happened. But KAKE is a TV station out of Wichita. We found out that they were taking a plane, flying one of their planes to Colby to cover this event that was going on. And somehow, I don't know how I did it, but we got Renee on that plane with the TV crew. And so she packed quickly. We took her. It was actually a smaller airport in the east edge of Wichita called Jabara Airport, where she flew from and then flew directly into Colby. After that I was pretty much in the dark. I did call my wife back, and she had a little bit more information as to what happened, but Renee made it in time, and luckily her dad survived. The bullet was lodged in his heart, next to his heart, and the surgeons felt like if they tried to remove it, it might kill him. So he lived with that bullet in him, and I didn't know the man personally, and I don't know whether he still lives here or not, but I had never heard that he did pass away, but I don't know what the status is right now. And my student's name, she didn't have the last name of Christie. Her last name is Hedden, Renee Hedden. Okay, we probably left mid-morning. I imagine we must have met them, had already gone by Grainfield and Stuckey's there. It was just kind of a creepy feeling knowing you met the killers. But yeah, it was a general session, and it had just started, and Renee was opening the conference as president, and as soon as we could get her, we took her out and went up to my room. So the conference had just started. And I don't remember telling the other students. No, I didn't, because I didn't know, other than he had been shot, that's all I knew, and I didn't think that was fair to them to tell them something like that and then not know, what the status was at that point in time. So no, I didn't. I just said that Renee had an emergency and we have flown her back to Colby. I don't remember them asking many questions other than, "Is she okay?" And I said, "Yeah, she's fine." She had an emergency and we were able to get her on a flight home. We stayed in Wichita at the conference at the hotel for 2 nights and then came back the third day. We went on Wednesday and returned on Friday. And I know the students did hear that, and I don't remember any of them asking me if that was why Renee flew back. Didn't register, I don't think, with most of them that was what was going on. I don't remember having to answer very many questions. They pretty much concentrated on the task that they were there for. I learned that there were 2 people one from Levant and one from Colby. Levant is a small town about 7 miles west of Colby, and that there were 2, and I think they both worked at the grain elevator there, but there were 2, she told me, that were taken in a pickup and went north of Highway 24 a few miles. She told me that they were executed terribly. If I remember right, they made them kneel in the ditch and they shot them they were turned away from the killer. Daniel Rometta shot them in the head, the back of the head, then left them there. Maurice Christie was shot before that at the actual grain elevator. If I remember right, he was shot through a window, but they left him. I guess they thought maybe they killed him, and then took the other 2 outside of town, north of Levant, a couple of miles off of Highway 24, and executed them and left them there. One other thing, too, that I remembered, when Daniel Rometta and Lisa Dunn, and I think the other guy's name was Hunter, if I remember right. I don't know whether they came into Colby, because I-70 is kind of south of Colby about a mile, whether they came into Colby off of I-70 and then got on Highway 24, was kind of in the center of Colby, and went west to Levant. But I think his name was Albright, highway patrolman. I guess they were speeding or something, and he pulled them over and they shot him. He was able to make it back to the patrol car and call in for help, and that's when the rest of the police got involved in the chase and that sort of thing. There was another, and I maybe it was at Stuckey's in Greenfield, an 18-year-old boy that was shot 6 times but lived.
So what you're thinking of actually is an 18-year-old woman in Texas. They robbed a convenience store in a very small town just across the border from Louisiana and took her. They abducted her from the store, told her about a few miles down the road, they told her to get out of the car and take off running into the woods. And as she was running away, they shot her 5 times, a couple times in the stomach and a few times in her legs. And she did survive. She was very young. They thought they killed her. They left her for dead. In her testimony, that she testified in a couple of the trials, I believe in her Florida testimony, she said she pretended to be dead so that they would stop shooting her. And then they drove off, and she crawled to the road, obviously covered in blood and everything. And then somebody saw her, stopped, and took her to the hospital.
I think she was 18 years old.
She was. Yeah. She had just graduated high school. Yeah.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Or was about to graduate high school. Yeah.
Yeah, was about to graduate. Yeah.
Yeah. It was.
As far as
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as far as when I got back with the students 2 days, but on Friday, of course, everything was kind of put together by then. People knew what happened, everything, and the community was just terribly floored. I mean, that this sort of thing could happen. Mr. Schrader, and Rick Schrader was one of the victims, and he was married to one of my former students, and he also graduated in my sister's class. He was only 29, and that really shook the town, as well as Mr. Moore, as well, the other one that was shot and killed. But, people were asking questions. Of course, there were TV crews here. A lot of it was on the news, and I think by the weekend, and the end of the weekend, people had a really good idea of what happened and what the truth was. It was kind of interesting. They took Daniel Rometta because they injured him, shot him, and he was in the hospital here in Colby. And one of my friends, dad or mom or relative, was in the room next to him. Yeah, I talked to her yesterday. She actually works at a dentist's office, and she told me that. I didn't know that, but she said it was really, really scary because they had a police officer at the door, of course. But to be in the room next to Daniel Rometta was frightening for her.
Yeah.
I'm sure you won't know all this, but I remember him Daniel Remetta making statements to the effect that I just want to kill people, and that after they caught him and he was incarcerated at the first place, he made the statement that he wanted to be executed.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Okay. Probably the worst experience I've ever had to tell a student. Yeah.
He's alive.
Her dad, she didn't know. And I'm sure she flew all the way back to Colby still not knowing.
Another question I have for you, actually, while we're still on here, I've heard all kinds of, not just specifically from Kansas, and I'm sure you already know, when these big highways were put all over the United States, they were perfect for drug trafficking, and there's lots of stolen cars and, all kinds of things, all kinds of people doing things they shouldn't be doing. Had you, at the time that this happened, had you ever heard of anything similar, in Kansas happening on I-70 or anything like that? Or was this the first time that this has ever happened over there?
It's something you don't really think about, that happens. But the thing I can think of in terms of, and I can't give you a year or a date or anything, but there's a rest stop about 7 miles or less west of Colby on I-70, and there was a murder there. I think you're correct, and everybody else is too. It's an interstate, and it's one of the major ones that runs through the United States, and I think an awfully lot does go on that we're unaware of. And so, whoever's telling you that information is probably true.
Death rides the highway.